Raul Luciano owned the city's concrete and its politicians. No one had ever told him no. No one had ever made him flinch. He was an athletic force, a ruthless kingpin who laughed at federal indictments and routinely had grown men broken for the slightest hint of disrespect. By every metric that mattered in this underworld, he was untouchable. Then a plus-size waitress in a burgundy apron put him on the floor, cold, in 4 seconds flat. It wasn't his elite security detail. It wasn't a rival cartel hitman. It was a full-figured girl with a messy bun and a warm smile that turned clinically lethal the moment he made the mistake of crossing her line. When she stood over his unconscious, tattooed frame in the stunned silence of Manhattan's most exclusive private lounge, she didn't panic. She didn't run. She simply smoothed her apron, picked up her tray without spilling a single drop, and melted back into the shadows. Something fundamental had just shattered in the order of their world. If you are already leaning in, needing to know who she really is, hit subscribe. You're exactly where you belong. Erica woke at 4 a.m. sharp. No alarm rang in the small, Spartan apartment. Her internal clock was a finely tuned machine that treated sleep as a tactical vulnerability. For 30 seconds, she lay completely still, eyes tracking the darkness, cataloging the ambient sounds of the building, the rhythmic thrum of the water pipes, the distant hum of traffic, the specific creak of the floorboard outside her deadbolt door. Satisfied the perimeter was clear, she rolled out of bed. The room was chosen for its stark efficiency. It had 0 blind spots and a window facing a narrow, unmonitored alleyway. Across the threshold lay a strip of high-tinsel fishing line at ankle height, a primitive but foolproof early warning system. Beneath the loose floorboard under her bed rested her insurance, a cold-rolled steel folding knife, $5,000 in unmarked bills, and a clean passport bearing a name she had never spoken aloud. It was a life packed into a single duffel bag, ready to move in under 3 minutes. Before the sun broke the skyline, Erica worked. In the center of the cramped room, she pushed her body through a punishing, silent routine. She didn't train for lean agility. She trained to maximize her raw power and leverage her broad, full-figured frame into an unyielding anchor. Her thick arms and broad shoulders moved with clinical, rhythmic precision as she executed hundreds of heavy, low-impact repetitions. She filed down the calluses on her knuckles until they were smooth to the touch, hiding the structural damage of a professional life spent breaking things. By midday, the lethal operative evaporated. She braided her hair into a tight, practical bun, slipped on a pressed white shirt, and tied the burgundy apron around her curvy hips. For 14 months, she had been Erica Cattaneo, the quiet, pleasant waitress at the lounge. She had turned blending into the background into a meticulous art form, using her soft facial features, round cheeks, and an easy, unassuming smile to become completely invisible to the wealthy predators she served. She moved like part of the furniture, carrying heavy trays with an effortless grace that made people overlook her entirely. She had built this wall of anonymity brick by invisible brick, truly believing the illusion would hold. She was safe, hidden in plain sight, right up until the exact second Raul Luciano decided to reach out. The bakery on 4th Street smelled of yeast and burnt sugar, a safe haven of warmth at 2:30 in the morning. Erica sat in the corner booth, her back pressed against the solid brick wall, tracking the street lamp light cutting through the front glass. This was her compromise with reality, a predictable, lonely routine where the counter staff knew her only as the quiet girl from the lounge who liked her coffee black. Then the brass bell above the door chimed, and the air in the room instantly pressurized. Raul Luciano walked in alone. He wasn't wearing his tailored suit jacket. His fitted black dress shirt was open at the collar, the heavy ink on his forearms exposed in the harsh, fluorescent light of the pastry case. There were no bodyguards flanking the door, no idling black SUVs blocking the pavement outside. He had bypassed her entire psychological perimeter by stripping away his empire and coming as a single, unescorted variable. He didn't hesitate. He walked directly to her booth and slid his large frame into the opposite seat without asking. For a long, Heavy moment. Neither of them spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the display refrigerators. Luciano rested his hands flat on the laminate tabletop. On his left wrist, beneath the luxury stainless steel watch, a thick, ugly ring of purple and black bruising was already setting into his skin, the precise, clinical imprint of Erica's forefinger lock. He didn't look angry. His dark eyes held the cold, calculating focus of a man who had survived by treating every anomaly as a fatal threat. My security team spent the last 3 hours searching databases that don't exist for a waitress named Erica Cattaneo, Luciano said, his voice a low, unhurried rumble that barely carried past the table. They found nothing. No tax history before 14 months ago, no high school records, no digital footprint. Erica kept her hands wrapped around her warm mug, her face remaining perfectly smooth, her round cheeks hiding the sudden spike of adrenaline tightening her chest. "I'm just a waitress, Mr. Luciano." Luciano leaned forward, his athletic bulk casting a shadow across the table, his gaze dropping to the faint, smoothed-down calluses on her knuckles. A waitress doesn't drop a 200-pound man using his own center of gravity against him. A waitress doesn't break a standard defensive perimeter in 4 seconds flat. He tapped the bruised skin of his wrist. "I don't like mysteries in my city, Erica. Who trained you?" Erica left the bakery into the biting pre-dawn air, the logic of her survival already shifting. She didn't go back to her apartment. Instead, she took 3 separate subway lines, doubling back twice to confirm she wasn't being tracked before slipping into an internet cafe on the edge of Queens. In the dim, flickering light of a terminal in the back, her fingers moved over the keyboard with mechanical speed. She bypassed standard security protocols and accessed a private, encrypted dark web forum where high-tier underworld intelligence was traded. Her breath caught, a cold weight settling heavily in her stomach. There it was. The high-definition surveillance feed from the Velvet Lounge had been ripped, compiled, and uploaded to a secure Onion server 3 hours ago. The footage was brutally clear. It showed every detail of her movement, the precise shift of her hips, the unyielding leverage of her broad shoulders, and the lethal, fluid twist of her wrist that had sent Raul Luciano crashing to the floor. To a common criminal, it was a spectacular fluke. To the people who had built her, it was a digital fingerprint as distinct as a signature. She closed the browser, destroyed the session data, and stepped back out onto the street. She was 3 blocks away when the disposable burner phone buried deep inside her heavy winter coat began to vibrate. It didn't stop. It buzzed with a rhythmic, demanding persistence that shattered the quiet morning. Erica pulled the cheap plastic device from her pocket. The screen displayed a scrambled, multi-layered string of zeroed-out numbers. She flipped it open, pressing the plastic edge to her ear, remaining completely silent. She didn't breathe. 14 months is a respectable run, Erica, the voice on the other end said. It was smooth, conversational, and carrying the distinctive, chilling inflection of a man who oversaw budgets for unacknowledged government operations. But you always did leave too much of an impression. The director was quite impressed by the leverage you used on Luciano. Your technique hasn't degraded at all. Erica's grip tightened around the casing until the plastic groaned. The illusion of her quiet, full-figured life, her burgundy apron, and her peaceful isolation dissolved instantly into the gray New York morning. They knew exactly where she was. The iron gates of the Luciano estate didn't open for strangers, but they opened for Erica. She didn't slip through the shadows or try to bypass the thermal cameras lining the stone perimeter. She walked straight up the brick driveway, her duffel bag slung over one broad shoulder, letting the security detail see every inch of her frame. She was done with illusions. 2 minutes later, she was standing in Raul Luciano's private study. The room smelled of dark mahogany, expensive tobacco, and old power. Luciano sat behind a massive desk, his fitted black shirt open at the collar, his dark eyes tracking her with a mixture of cold calculation and genuine curiosity. He didn't call for his guards. He simply waited. Erica dropped the duffel bag heavily onto the oriental rug. She walked directly to the desk, stepped into his space, and extended both of her hands, palms up. In the warm light of the desk lamp, the soft, kind features of the simple lounge waitress completely vanished. Her thick hands were a map of violence. Across her knuckles were the faint, silver tracks of old lacerations, and the bone structure of her right hand carried the distinct, slightly uneven thickness of a professional break that had healed under field conditions. "My real name is Erica Cattaneo," she said, her voice dropping the pleasant, deferential tone of the lounge, replacing it with the flat, clinical cadence of a soldier. 3 years ago, I was the lead breach specialist for a deniable government syndicate. My job was to break doors, anchor tactical perimeters, and neutralize high-value targets. I didn't hide behind a sniper rifle. I used my mass and my training to dismantle threats up close. Luciano looked at her hands, then slowly raised his gaze to meet her eyes. "And why is the elite breach specialist clearing plates in my lounge?" "Because my last mission was a setup," Erica said plainly, refusing to flinch. "My entire unit was wiped out in a gray zone op. I ran to New York to disappear, to stop being a weapon. But that footage from your lounge leaked. My old handlers tracked the signature of my takedown. They just activated my burner phone. They gave me an ultimatum: execute you from the inside within 24 hours, or they exposed my past to the global intelligence community." She pulled her hands back, her chest rising steadily beneath her heavy coat. "I am tired of running, Raul, and I don't bleed for ghosts anymore." The rain started just after midnight, drumming a steady, heavy rhythm against the tall, arched windows of the study. The room was dark save for the amber glow of the fireplace and a single desk lamp that cut through the shadows. Raul Luciano sat motionless in the leather armchair, his black shirt discarded, revealing the intricate web of tattoos covering his torso and the shallow, jagged laceration running along his right bicep, a souvenir from a stray shard of flying glass at the docks. Erica moved with quiet, practiced economy. She didn't wear the burgundy apron anymore. She wore a simple gray thermal shirt that clung to her broad shoulders and curved hips. Kneeling beside his chair, she opened a field medical kit on the floor. Her movements were entirely stripped of the gentle deference she had spent 14 months mimicking at the lounge. Her thick, scarred fingers were incredibly steady as she cleaned the wound with antiseptic, her face a mask of absolute clinical focus. "They won't erase you here," Luciano said softly, leaning slightly forward, his athletic chest shifting into the light. He placed his left hand over her scarred knuckles, his grip firm and anchoring. "A weapon is only dangerous to the person who doesn't know how to hold it. Here, you aren't a secret." Erica looked at their joined hands, feeling the shift in the room, an unshakable alignment born not from criminal necessity, but from a mutual understanding of what it cost to survive at the top. She quietly finished taping the bandage over his wound, stood up to her full height, and for the first time in 3 years, she didn't feel the need to look for the exit. Erica sat before the glow of 3 monitors in the dark corner of Luciano's private terminal room. She had traded her apron for a headset and an encrypted tablet, letting her tactical intelligence background take the lead. Her eyes flicked rapidly across rows of logistics data, manifests, and customs clearances spanning the past 6 months. To a standard auditor, the numbers looked pristine, but Erica didn't look at what was visible. She looked for the negative space, the deliberate omissions that only a trained operative would recognize as systemic evasion. The discrepancies were microscopic but regular. A container ship from Rotterdam arriving 6 minutes ahead of schedule every second Tuesday. A specific customs broker in the port of Newark missing a single digital signature on cargo manifests that were always approved anyway. Erica tracked the anomalies back through encrypted routing channels, her fingers flying over the mechanical keyboard with precise, rhythmic speed. Her broad frame remained perfectly still, an anchor of concentration in the cold room as she cross-referenced the altered shipping codes against internal security logs. By 3 a.m., the digital trail crystallized into a definitive threat matrix. The diverted shipments weren't carrying luxury goods or untraceable cash. They were moving high-grade military hardware and communication jammers directly into the city's industrial sectors. It was the classic logistics preparation for an aggressive, internal takeover. Erica mapped the digital signatures used to authorize the routing overrides. The encryption key didn't belong to a rival gang or an outside cartel. It belonged to Marcus Vance, Luciano's top lieutenant and the man who commanded half of the syndicate's street enforcement. She pulled up Vance's encrypted communication logs, breaking through his secondary firewall within 12 minutes. The data revealed a coordinated timeline. The weapon caches were fully staged, and the final shipment was scheduled to clear the docks in less than 48 hours, the exact moment the internal coup was set to launch. Erica closed the terminal, transferred the ciphered intelligence file to a secure flash drive, and stood up into the quiet dark. The atmospheric pressure of the entire Luciano organization had just plummeted. The Viper wasn't at the gates. It was sitting at the right hand of the throne, and the clock was already running down. The physical envelope was waiting on the center of her small kitchen table. Erica didn't move past the threshold for 2 full minutes. Her eyes instantly locked onto the high-tinsel fishing line she had strung across the entryway. It was perfectly intact, and the heavy deadbolts remained completely untampered with. They hadn't forced their way in. They had bypassed the third-story window from the sheer drop of the brick alleyway, leaving absolutely no trace of entry. It was the clinical, expensive calling card of the agency that had trained her. She approached the table with slow, deliberate steps. Inside the heavy manila paper lay 2 items: a sealed glass vial containing a clear, viscous liquid and a single sheet of unlined paper. The text was printed in the cold, bureaucratic typeface of an official operational brief. There were no signatures and no pleasantries. The instructions were absolute. The vial contained a high-grade, untraceable neurotoxin that would cause cardiac arrest within 4 hours of ingestion. She had exactly 24 hours to introduce it into Raul Luciano's drink. The penalty for noncompliance was spelled out with terrifying simplicity below the execution strategy. If Luciano was alive by midnight tomorrow, the encrypted files detailing the gray zone operation in Eastern Europe, the Black Ops mission where her unit had been compromised, and the ensuing collateral damage had been buried, would be leaked simultaneously to the global intelligence community and the federal prosecutors tracking Luciano's empire. Her real name, her photographic profile, and the fabricated war crimes the agency had used to cover their own tracks would become public record. She would be transformed from an invisible ghost into the most hunted woman on the planet. Erica sat down heavily in the wooden chair, the glass vial catching the weak light filtering through the window. Her broad shoulders tensed as she looked at the poison. The walls of the carefully constructed sanctuary she had spent 14 months building were completely gone. The agency was forcing her back into the dirt, demanding she become the monster they had always claimed she was. She picked up the vial, its cold surface pressing into the smoothed-down calluses of her palm. They expected her to panic, to run, or to slip the poison into a glass of expensive scotch. But as she stared at the expiration date of her anonymity, Erica felt a cold, hard certainty settle deep into her chest. She was done playing their game. The storm hit the coastline with absolute fury, driving walls of freezing rain across the rusted labyrinth of the shipyard. Inside the central transit terminal, Raul Luciano was cornered. Marcus Vance stood over him, flanked by heavily armed syndicate traitors, while the shadow of the rogue agency's strike team sealed the perimeter. They had come to witness an execution, expecting the broken waitress to deliver the fatal dose to save her own skin. They didn't know she had already chosen her side. From the high gantry above the terminal, Erica's thick, scarred fingers gripped the main industrial breaker. She didn't hesitate. With a violent, metallic crack, she severed the primary feed, plunging the massive concrete terminal into absolute, suffocating darkness. Panic is a liability in the dark. Erica moved through it like a native element. The heavy tactical gear of the agency operatives made them slow, their night vision optics rendering them arrogant. Erica bypassed their sightlines entirely. She dropped from the gantry with terrifying silence, her broad frame hitting the floor with controlled precision. She found the first agent in the blind spot between two shipping containers, using her sheer mass to crush his windpipe before he could broadcast a warning. She moved like a shadow woven from violence. Two advances men opened fire blindly, their muzzle flashes giving away their coordinates. Erica slipped beneath their chaotic firing arcs, utilizing her unyielding leverage to shatter one man's knee and driving the reinforced steel of her boot into the other's jaw. The darkness belonged to her. Every brutal, calculated strike was a rejection of her past, a definitive refusal to ever be managed again. When the backup generators finally roared to life, casting the terminal in harsh, flickering sodium light, the coup was entirely broken. The elite strike team was incapacitated, and Vance lay groaning against a forklift, his weapon arm cleanly dislocated. At the center of the carnage stood Erica Cattaneo. Her wet hair clung to her neck, her breathing steady, her scarred hands empty but definitively lethal. She looked across the scattered bodies to Raul Luciano, who was already pushing himself off the concrete, his dark eyes locked onto hers with a fierce, unbreakable pride. She wasn't an invisible waitress anymore, and she wasn't a hunted ghost. She was the immovable anchor of his empire, and she was finally exactly where she belonged.